We're always told that 5G is the most secure network generation ever built. And hey, in a lot of ways, it really is a huge leap forward. But the real story, well, as always, it's a little more complicated than that. The strength of any shield, after all, depends not just on its design, but on how it's actually held. So let's dive in together and take a closer look at the cracks in that shield.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to peel back the layers of 5G security in 4 parts. We'll kick things off with the gap between design and reality. Then we'll explore some cracks in the actual architecture, look ahead at future threats, and finally, we'll wrap it all up and put everything into perspective. That's our roadmap.
Okay, first things first. We have to get our heads around the single most important idea for understanding the security of any complex system, really. And that is the massive difference between how something is designed on paper and how it actually gets rolled out in the messy, complicated, real world.
So think of it like this. On one hand, you've got the blueprint, and the 5G standards are incredibly strong. We're talking features like strong mutual authentication. That's where both your phone and the network have to prove they are who they say they are, and, for the very first time, encrypted user identities. Awesome, right? But then, on the other hand, there's reality. All of that amazing security completely depends on network operators putting it into practice flawlessly. That means getting every single configuration just right, applying every update on time, and patching every single vulnerability. That space between the perfect blueprint and the real-world execution, that's the security gap.
Okay, so we've got that design versus reality gap down. Now let's actually step inside the 5G fortress itself. We're going to go looking for some of those potential cracks in its internal architecture, the specific places where that implementation gap can really show up.
I want you to think of this one as an old, secret tunnel left over from a previous castle design. See, for convenience, our brand new 5G phones can still connect to older 4G and even 2G networks. And here's the sneaky part. An attacker can actually exploit this. They can force your device to downgrade to that older, much less secure network, completely bypassing a lot of 5G's shiny new protections. Until we have what's called standalone 5G everywhere, this backward compatibility is always going to be a risk.
And that leads us to something really, really important. Encryption isn't some magic wand for privacy. Yeah, 5G encrypts your identity and what you say, but it can't hide something called metadata. You can think of it as the data about your data.
And this, right here, is the key. Even if a bad guy can't read your message, the what, they can still learn a ton just by analyzing your metadata. They can see which cell towers you connect to, where you are, when you make calls, who you're talking to, and for how long. Just by looking at these patterns, this traffic analysis can paint an incredibly detailed picture of your life.
So unlike older, clunkier networks, the core of 5G is built kind of like a modern cloud app. It uses these things called APIs, application programming interfaces, to let all the different parts of the network talk to each other. Now, this makes it super flexible and powerful, but it also means every single one of those connections is a potential door for an attacker. One little misconfiguration, one weak security key, and somebody could potentially get inside and start messing with internal functions.
Okay, now for one of the coolest, most hyped features of 5G, network slicing. This basically lets operators take their one big physical network and digitally carve it up into multiple virtual networks. So you could have one slice that's just for, say, ultra-reliable autonomous cars, another slice for high-speed video streaming to your phone, and a third for billions of tiny smart sensors, all running on the exact same hardware.
And bam! This brings us right back to our main point, doesn't it? The separation between these slices is purely logical. It's just software. Underneath it all, they're sharing the same physical routers and servers. So if that software wall is built poorly, if the isolation is misconfigured, the boundaries can start to get blurry. And that could potentially let data leak from one slice to another, or let an attack on a low-priority slice affect a really critical one.
So we've been looking at all these potential weaknesses inside the architecture. But what about the bigger, more systemic threats that could affect the entire network from the outside?
Let's zoom out for a minute. We're going to move away from the internal architecture and look at two huge external challenges that networks have to get ready for: the integrity of the global supply chain and the looming threat of quantum computing.
You know, this gets to something absolutely fundamental. Security isn't just about clever code and encryption. A network is built from physical stuff, hardware, firmware, and software from dozens of different companies all over the world. If just one of those components, a router, a chip, whatever, is compromised before it's even installed, then pretty much all the software security you build on top of it can be worthless.
Trust in that entire supply chain is a massive, massive part of security.
Okay, now let's talk about a threat that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but it's very real. The encryption that protects your identity on 5G networks today is incredibly strong against the computers we have today. But we are right on the edge of a new era of quantum computing, which plays by a totally different set of rules. A powerful enough quantum computer could, in theory, shatter our current encryption standards. The race is already on to develop and deploy what's called post-quantum cryptography to make sure our networks are safe in the future.
All right, so we've been through secret tunnels, leaky network slices, and even the threat of quantum computers. So where does that leave us? It's time to bring it all together and give 5G security its final report card.
When you really look at it, it's a story of two halves, right? On the one hand, the list of strengths is seriously impressive. The design principles, things like strong authentication and encrypted identities, are a huge step forward. But then, on the other hand, we have all these areas where we have to be vigilant, all the things we just talked about. It really shows that while the design is strong, the real-world deployment requires constant, never-ending attention to detail. And that right there is the big takeaway. 5G is, without a doubt, the most secure mobile generation we have ever deployed. But security isn't a feature you can just build once and then forget about. It is a continuous process. It's about monitoring, updating, and adapting to a threat landscape that is always, always changing. The work of securing our connected world is never, ever finished.